Hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj. Welcome to both of you, with us from now until just before midnight. So to the front pages then, let's start with The Guardian. It leads on Downing Street, describing the remarks made about Diane Abbott by the Conservatives' biggest donor, racist and wrong, after senior politicians piled pressure on Rishi Sunak to intervene. The paper then makes further allegations against Frank Hester on its front page. Earlier today, in a statement, he said that he was deeply sorry and regards racism as a poison which has no place in public life. Heartbreak and horror, says The Mirror, reporting that 1,000 people fear for their loved ones' remains over the funeral parlour scandal. The Daily Mail also reporting on that story. They've spoken to families who've been affected by the scandal. The Metro has news of 3 arrests in an investigation into alleged fraud relating to a company that runs a chain of nursing homes. The Financial Times reports on the challenges faced by the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, as they try to keep inflation there under control. The Daily Star looks at our eating habits, saying that our table manners have declined. And The Sun reports that Paul O'Grady has left a staggering £15.5 million in his will, with £125,000 set aside to look after his 5 pet dogs. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of those papers while you watch us. But let's bring in our guests then, Jenny Kleeman and Ali Miraj. A couple of other papers still to come in by the look of it. But let's kick off with The Guardian, the reporting of which led to the accusations against the Tories' biggest donor. And finally, tonight we've heard from the Prime Minister that indeed those comments against the former Labour MP Diane Abbott were racist.
Yes, finally we heard that tonight. We heard it this evening, but throughout most of today, Downing Street were refusing to condemn the remarks as racist at all. And in fact, this morning, the government ministers on the round talking to journalists were condemning the remarks, but not saying that they were racist. You would be very angry if you were Graham Stewart, the Energy Secretary, who was around on the broadcast round this morning, refusing to call it racist because clearly he had been told not to. Same goes for Mel Stride, who is being interviewed today, doing this ridiculous linguistic gymnastics that is reminiscent of what happened with Lee Anderson only 2 weeks ago, when he said something that was very clearly Islamophobic, in my opinion, and yet Number 10 would not condemn it as such. It is a sign of weakness that it has taken this long for Rishi Sunak to say these remarks were racist. The man in question, Frank Hester, has given £10 million to the party. It is, we're in the run-up to the election. They don't want to alienate donors. They need money. They won't want to give the money back. There is Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. This is going to come up. Are they prepared to take money from anyone? If it was an anti-Semitic person or someone who had made an anti-Semitic remark, would they be happy to hold on to that money? If the Labour Party had been given £10 million from someone who was anti-Semitic, would the Conservatives say, that's totally fine, let's just leave things in the past? There is this sense quite often with the Conservative Party in government that when there is something uncomfortable for them, that the message is, we just need to move on, we just need to accept that people have apologised. But I think the kind of standards in public life and in political discourse have been getting lower and lower over the past few years. And these remarks, you know, so many senior Conservatives coming out today saying that they were racist. It shouldn't take this long for the Prime Minister to condemn things that clearly are unacceptable in public life.
So help us understand the hesitation in both these cases then. With Lee Anderson, you know, was it clearly to keep him within the Conservative Party fold, given his move to Reform UK? And in this case, with Diane Abbott, is it simply to keep hold of the 10 million, do you think?
Well, I think on Lee Anderson, I think the party genuinely probably thinks that there is an issue with a small group of Islamists actually going on marches. This is what Michael Gove has said. This is what he's talking about, looking at the definition of what extremism is, which, frankly, I think is all a bit of a red herring, because there's a perfectly acceptable definition of extremism in the PREVENT strategy itself. And when I speak to senior police officers, I was doing one on my show the other day, he basically said that the reason why we don't enforce the law is because we don't want to be perceived to be racist. That's why we're not clamping down. So I don't think it's a question of definition of extremism. I think it's a question of actually supporting the police to do their job properly. So that's Lee Anderson, but he's gone to Reform now anyway. So that's yesterday's news. on the substance of today's fiasco, and it's difficult to keep up because there's a fiasco a week in the Tory party at the moment. The party's become more and more debased as time goes on. And I say this with no pleasure whatsoever. As a former Conservative candidate back in the day, this party is now completely on the ropes. It takes the Prime Minister hours to come out and condemn this. And Kemi Badenoch, who's got potential leadership ambitions herself, it's a thinly veiled secret, I mean, everyone knows it, actually puts out a statement or a tweet out before Number 10 even responds. They look weak, they look slow, they look indecisive. It does not take a rocket scientist. I'm not Dan Abbott's biggest fan, but this is plainly racist, plainly racist and wrong. And Diane Abbott is a human being. She's an MP. MPs have a serious job to do. You can tackle their statements, not the individuals. And she says this evening that she's frightened. Yeah. She goes around on her own. She's a woman. This is completely wrong. We're not going to be getting quality people into public life, and I can tell you we need them. I mean, look at the state of the debasement of public life we have now. Yeah. We're not going to get quality people in, women or men, if this kind of nonsense is allowed to fester.
Yes, and Ms Abbott, the first black woman to enter Parliament, should be celebrated,
Absolutely.
As a trailblazer in that respect. And just in terms of The Guardian, further allegations about Frank Hester,
yes.
Suggesting there was no room for the Indians and suggested staff climbed onto a train roof during a crowded meeting before saying he made a lot of jokes about racism.
Yes.
He's looking forward to going to Malaysia to find more jokes,
yes.
etc., etc.
Would you want to take money from this person?
These are allegations.
These are allegations. But even if they're allegations, would you want to be associated by this person?
They would not have known at the time.
No, but the thing is, these are donations that came quite recently. He's very supportive, in particular, of Rishi Sunak.
And the first meeting was in 2019, wasn't it?
First meeting was, and in fact, you had ministers today saying, "Oh, these are comments made half a decade ago," desperately trying to say, this is stuff that happened a long time ago. Yes, it's bad, but again, we all need to move on. I mean, I think we don't need a new definition of extremism. We need a new definition of racism, or at least a firm definition, so that we cannot have this ridiculous gaslighting of people saying that comments are wrong and inappropriate, but being unable to say why. Most people would recognise it.
But Jenny, come on, look. If someone's saying that looking at Dan Abbott makes you, words to the effect, makes you want to hate all black women and she should be shot, even if that's metaphorical, not... I mean, you can't use words like that.
Well, you can't, in any circumstances.
Of course, right? Because especially when... I'm sure that he... Look, I don't know Frank Hester from Adams, but I'm sure that he didn't genuinely mean that Diane Abbott should be shot. But that's not the point. We're living in an environment where it is very sensitive.
We're
MPs put them out there.
Where MPs are
died,
getting shot.
And they have been killed. They have been killed.
They had been killed.
So one has to be very careful with language, and especially in an increasingly polarised, divided, divisive environment. This kind of rhetoric, even if it was 5 years ago, I frankly don't care. The thing that Prime Minister should remember is there will always be instances where people will say ridiculous, stupid, unforgivable things. The question is how you act when you find out.
Yes, exactly.
Well, he has apologised, has he not? And said
Finally.
to contact her and everything.
Yeah, but this isn't about him, it is about Rishi Sunak.
OK.
But he's still not saying it's racist. He's still not saying it's racist.
No, Hester is not saying
it's racist. Hester's not saying
Rishi Sunak has finally, at the end of the day, after all of these, after you've got William Hague, you've got Kwasi Kwarteng, Kemi Badenoch, all these people saying it's racist, looming Prime Minister's questions tomorrow, he finally uses the R word. But
the statement from the Prime Minister's official spokesman, the comments allegedly made by Frank Hester were racist and wrong. He has now rightly apologised for the offence caused, and where remorse is shown, it should be accepted. The I, suggesting he was bounced into it after Kemi Badenoch, called it out.
Yes.
But anyway,
yeah, and kind of more sort of strength and confidence from her than from the leader of her party, you might say.
Yeah. To the Daily Telegraph now. Ali, why don't you kick off with this one? Keir Starmer will allow a vote on assisted dying, a campaign, you could argue, that's been brought to the fore again by Esther Rantzen.
Well, Esther Rantzen's got a very clear view on this. She's got terminal cancer. She's been talking very openly about potentially going to Switzerland to a Dignitas clinic, to die at a time of her choosing, surrounded by her friends and family. She even told us what she wanted to eat and drink. Although I think she likes caviar. Anyway, Starmer has said in a phone call to her that he will look to, in the first term of a Labour government, to bring this to a vote. It would be a free vote in Parliament. It's a matter of conscience. I must say I'm deeply concerned about it all. I absolutely understand and empathise with people in the situation of Esther Rantzen. I really do. But what worries me is that if we move to a position where today we say it's terminally ill people, and then tomorrow we say, well, it's your decision to choose when you die, we will be very quickly going down the road of what's happened in Belgium when a girl in her early 20s who on the back of the Brussels terrorist attack some years ago was completely mentally disturbed by this. Every time a balloon went off or popped, she thought she was in the terrorist attack and wanted to die. And with her parents supported this decision. And I just think a woman in her early 20s, is that what Western society is coming to? That we would assist someone dying? So I'm deeply concerned about this being the thin end of the wedge.
Well, I mean, I take a different view on all of this. I think that in 100 years' time, when we look back on how we have allowed people to end their lives either through really unsafe means or dying very slowly without dignity, we will think that this was something that we really should have got right a long time ago. I mean, you talk about this example of this Belgian girl, and of course, anyone who could be made to feel like they should be made to feel like they should live. But as it stands at the moment, there are traumatised people in the UK, for example, who will still be taking their own lives, but using much less safe means.
Jenny, how do you feel about the pressure, though, that potentially could be put? I mean, every situation...
I think this is an argument that is often made, but there is very little evidence for it in countries where assisted dying... And this particular vote is about assisted dying. It's not even about assisted suicide. It's about people who have 6 months or less to live. There is overwhelming public support for this. The idea that we are keeping people alive who are going to die imminently anyway and who would like to be able to die at a time and place of their choosing, surrounded by their families instead of slowly and painfully. There is... Poll after poll shows overwhelming public support. If we can frame a law to protect the vulnerable, and I believe that we can, we just need to have the kind of moral courage to do it properly.
Well, this is the argument Lord Faulkner makes. I've spoken to him about this, and he makes this argument that it's very, very tightly defined, terminally ill people. Look, fine, well, let's see where the debate goes. I would not be putting my faith in necessarily people who might want to pop off their relatives who are pretty unscrupulous for inheritance purposes.
Yes, and that is the argument that's often made. But if you look at places around the world where assisted suicide as well as assisted dying is legal, that hasn't.
I want to get one more story in, if you don't.
Okay.
Apologies for interrupting. It's a very important debate. NHS or children will be banned from receiving puberty blockers on prescription under NHS rules that come into effect immediately.
Yeah, this is again something that you can't really debate in 30 seconds. But
it's a big issue.
Puberty blockers, I mean, this is not unexpected. There was the CAS review into this. We have the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic is shutting at the end of this month. And now puberty blockers, which are tablets, medications that will halt puberty, about 100 children are on them at the moment. They're not going to be prescribed as a matter of course because there isn't enough evidence about the long-term effect of them.
What it does to your brain,
what it does to your brain.
It's very delicate. It's very delicate. Look, there were about 250 cases only a few years ago every year of gender dysphoria. There are now about 5,000. It's a serious issue. And what we've got to be very mindful here is potentially taking irreversible steps where people are potentially going to be... Every situation's different. One has to be very delicate about it. But potentially very young people, impressionable, going through changes where you're making changes that could be potentially irreversible. Very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is about blockers is they were always meant to not be potentially irreversible. They were meant to be a pause. There is evidence now that...
They were meant for girls going through early puberty from about the age of 7, taken briefly
on label
until they could actually hit the appropriate age to start.
The thing that I would say is it would be very frightening to be a trans child. These are children, not even people going through puberty at the moment, because a lot of trans charities and campaigners have said that trans children will be suicidal if they go through puberty. And there are going to be families who have been told
and others suggest 80% change their mind. So this is the difference.
But there will be families who worry about, oh, my gosh, is my child going to be suicidal? And the whole point is we need not medication, we need support, we need understanding, and we also need not ridiculous polarisation and demonisation of either side of this debate.
OK, I mean, it's another big subject, as you suggested, isn't it? Still to come, victims of the Horizon Post Office scandal will soon have their convictions formally overturned. We'll bring you the latest on that after this. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Jenny Kleeman and Ali Miraj. Welcome back to both of you. The Horizon scandal, we understand that the government is to introduce legislation on the quashing of wrongful convictions of sub-postmasters in Parliament very soon.
Yes, and
today, or as in tomorrow, yeah.
Today as in tomorrow. Yeah, this is always kind of legally quite difficult, although it's a sort of thing that anyone who's followed this story would think, well, of course this has to happen. This is a terrible injustice. These people should have their convictions overturned. However, the idea of Parliament being able to override the decisions of courts is concerning, and it's important to frame the law correctly. But yes, the legislation is going to be published today, and that is another step along the way to justice for those who are wrongly convicted. And those who have their convictions quashed, it says, they will be receiving this interim payment of £163,000 within 28 days of applying. But for a lot of the victims, this has come far too late. People have died waiting for justice.
Yes, it will cover prosecutions brought by the Post Office and the Crown Prosecution Service in England and Wales between 1996 and 2018. The government will also extend compensation to those who were never convicted and did not take part in legal action against the Post Office, because there's obviously these different groups, aren't there, Ali? But it can't come soon enough for many, despite the concerns legally, as Jenny explained.
No, absolutely, and it's one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history, so it's way over time. It's successive governments have it's happened on successive governments' watch that nothing has been done, and I'm glad finally that the government is taking action. And it's right that those who've been investigated but not convicted are going to get 75 grand, because there's also a reputational risk associated with all of this. People were vilified in their communities, othered, cold-shouldered. It destroyed
Even
lives.
within their own families.
Destroyed lives. So not before time.
Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph, shall we? It suggests universities are considering offering fewer places to British students amid the threat of financial collapse, suggesting they're losing places to wealthy foreign students. Just quickly, Jenny.
Yes, apparently, the funding model of our universities is broken. Universities in England made an average loss of £2,500 for every UK student they educated last year, according to the Russell Group. And apparently, it's making foreign students more attractive. However, we don't want to have so many foreign students, do we? Because we're trying to have less immigration, less visas. So what are we going to do? How are our universities going to function if the only way that they can break even is by having more foreign students, but we're not supposed to be allowing them in the country? It's a disgrace, really.
But the way they're going to do it is, what they're hinting at is they're going to actually restrict the number of domestic students and favour foreign students, even if they're limited, because they pay a lot more.
OK, both of you, we will see you later. Thank you both very much indeed. Jenny Kleeman, Ali Miraj, thank you.